Coming up on Forbidden Secrets. Ever get the feeling your dog knows something you don't? Ever wonder what it would be like to see, hear, and smell the world the way a dog does? Well, here's your chance, because we're going to take you into the secret world of dogs. Then, see how one FBI agent tackled corruption from within the Bureau and the price he paid.
An FBI that would do the things that we saw and knew were being done would stop at nothing to avoid accountability. Nothing.
And later, are aliens kidnapping humans? If so, it's a full-time job. For not a day goes by until someone, somewhere reports an alien abduction. Is it really happening? If not, what is? Discover the secret. Alien abductions.
If you have a pet, do you ever get the feeling they know something you don't? Well, guess what? You're right. Now discover what Rover really thinks of you as we explore the secret world of pets. A dog's world is so much different than ours. Sounds and smells flow into your pet dog's super senses, but are you running with the pack? His ancestors were wolves, and now this fateful guy sees you as the leader. Are you up to it? Let's see if any of the following seems familiar. All is quiet and peaceful, and then suddenly...
Fred, shut up!
You shouldn't scold him. He's sounding an alert to the pack, and that includes you.
The dog is trained correctly. He sees you as a pack leader. We've taken the dog out of his pack environment, and we are now his pack leader. We've taken him into our living accommodation, our way of life.
Dogs have an international communication system. One is by barking and one is by body language. And it's the same with it if anybody is breaking into somebody's house. A dog will indicate that there's something wrong, this shouldn't be happening, and it will indicate it to all the rest of the dogs in the neighborhood.
The message he's conveying in his bark is, everyone be alert, something's going down. But he's also nervous. This display of noise also calls for reinforcements from the pack, and you're the leader.
Come on, Fred, get in there. No, stay in there.
If you punish him for doing his job, he becomes confused. So right now, you must realize your loyal pal is only doing what comes natural.
Man saw wolf hunting and saw how clever he was and how they worked together as a pack, and decided it would be a good idea to work alongside the wolf so that he too could have some food. And eventually, man and wolf were working alongside together hunting. There's a discussion still going on about whether man actually joined the wolves or wolves went over and joined men.
The tail wag is not really a sign of friendliness. That's why people are sometimes bitten by a dog with a wagging tail. Tail wagging is a submissive offering, and right now he's bursting with energy, and the tail wag is helping him dissipate some of his nervous energy.
If you look at the breeds of dogs, except for a few new breeds, no dogs are naturally aggressive to other dogs. There are worn-off signs and everything else. We've taken their courage and we've trained their courage to work on command, but you will also get dogs that will protect what they think is their own area.
There are remarkable stories of bravery and amazing feats that seem like evidence of a sixth sense in dogs.
I can prove that any time that you like. On duty, you can have a raining snowstorm. There's no way in the world you can use the wind to indicate on somebody, but they will actually turn around and indicate on people against all known factors. Dogs have found cannonballs 15 foot down, 300 years ago. So, yes, dogs definitely have a sixth sense.
Tucked away in his den, that's your house, he uses his amazing senses to stay on guard. A dog's hearing is exceptionally acute, 6 to 10 times more sensitive than humans. While your house may sound like this to you, Rover is actually hearing something like this. Dogs also have the ability to move and shape their ears toward the sound. Well, most do. Dogs and cats don't see color like humans. They see in pastel shades. Their peripheral vision is wider than ours, and they see better in low light with exceptional detection of any movement, which every natural-born hunter needs. Outside, the dog can use his keenest sense to its fullest ability. A bloodhound's sense of smell enables him to follow a 4-day-old trail for up to 100 miles.
Good lad, good boy.
Dogs use all these abilities to help us in guiding for the blind, detecting drugs, termites, rats, bombs, missing persons, and bodies buried in snow or rubble.
So consequently, if you work the dog, whether it's just obedience, whether it's agility, whether it's tracking, trials, a dog, the more you work him, the happier he is, and the less faults or vices that will develop. They want to work, then work them.
If your senses now feel a little humbled, just remember that dogs have many less taste buds than us. That's why they love being the garbage gourmet. But what if Rover begins to think that he's the top dog of the pack and not you?
The owner hasn't done the pack leader, taken over with basic obedience training. The dog has been allowed as a nice, cuddly, fluffy puppy. You can sleep on the bed, you can get on the lounge. And how do you shift a 59-kilo dog that's showing you his teeth and saying, I'm in charge?
Come on, Chris, get up there. Come on, up.
Be firm and you'll win back the den. Here's a good way to reward your dog in a most wolf-like fashion. Scratching a male dog's chest is very appealing to him. This is because of its sexual significance. Scratching the ears also rings doggy pleasure bells. Chewing and licking the ears are all part of canine courtship. Next time you're with your dog, realize your animal lives in a very different world. Your home is his den, and the pack to protect, that's your family, and the top dog to please, that's you. Be a good leader and understand his needs, reactions, and instincts, because even the scruffiest of old mutts has an impressive pedigree.
Secrets.
Coming up. Are aliens kidnapping humans? Is it really happening? If not, what is? Discover the secret. Alien Abductions. Plus.
Secrets.
They've got the smile. They've got the crown. And now they've got the power. Beauty queens. They're changing the world in ways we can't keep secret.
Secrets.
And now, a little secret of life. Why do women feel colder than men? The answer right after this.
Forbidden secrets. Secrets. Forbidden secrets.
Why do many women complain of feeling colder than men? Well, sorry, ladies, but you have an extra layer of fat. Now, that fat makes it more difficult to get rid of the excess heat. Now, your body tries to cool down by sweating, but when the sweat evaporates, the skin feels a chilling effect, and therefore you feel colder.
Secrets.
Billions of your tax dollars are awarded each year in federal contracts to private companies. How can the government be certain these contractors are operating legally? They can't. Here's how to help Uncle Sam blow the whistle on fraud and get more than a pat on the back in return.
It was very, very classified, and I had all the clearances.
And it's worth big money.
Every single employee for a government contract can become a millionaire overnight.
But is it worth it to blow the whistle on the company you work for?
Look at me. I'm a prime example of what happens to a whistleblower.
Stephen Cohn and Chris Kolesnik run the National Whistleblower Center in Washington, D.C.
If we look at the contribution whistleblowers have made to society, it's immense. Under the False Claims Act, it's now known they've saved taxpayers under one law $4 billion. It also has what's known as a qui tam provision, which allows the whistleblower to share in the proceeds if the government collects on the fraud. Every single employee for a government contractor can become a millionaire overnight if they see that contractor ripping off the taxpayers and they turn it in.
The reason the government is willing to share is simple. People on the inside are the best weapon we have against fraud and corruption. People like Ruth Aldred. Ruth oversaw quality control of the AMRAAM project at Hughes, a multi-billion-dollar missile program for the U.S. government, and she didn't like what she saw.
The parts that originally started this case was the AMRAAM missile. We had found where those parts were on a very hot list, and they were rejects, but over the night, paperwork got changed and moved, and the next day they were ready to be sealed. And that is our defense. Those are fired from airplanes, you know, as our protection. I had people all over me because my girls wouldn't pass it. I say, you want to put your stamp? You go ahead. Mine or my girl's not going on it. And that's the way it was. I had a lot of loyalty to Hughes. I loved working there. I liked my boss. I enjoyed everything. I felt, what am I loyal to? These people are hurting me and I'm trying to do my job.
Even government agencies designed to protect the public are not immune to corruption, and it takes a whistleblower on the inside to reveal it. Dr. Frederick Whitehurst worked in the FBI's ultra-secret crime lab.
In an overview, I joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 1982 and was assigned eventually to the FBI laboratory in 1986. I saw problems in the lab ranging from contamination issues to reports being altered to evidence being essentially tampered with to testimony being given outside areas of expertise that people had. Considering the way they responded when I objected to it, the FBI fully stood behind those practices. Management was more interested in a body count and the number of kills and the number of convictions, if you will, than they were in justice, what we were there for.
Whitehurst also had a choice to make: remain silent or turn on the FBI. Stephen Cohn represented Dr. Whitehurst in court.
Dr. Whitehurst is a remarkable person who became a whistleblower. He's someone who, at the height of the Vietnam War, volunteered to fight, knowing the risks, and then re-enrolled, enlisted in combat infantry for 3 terms as a dedicated patriot who wanted to serve his country and did not blink about putting his life on the line. It's a remarkable person. And when he walked into my office, he was clear. I'm here to fix up the FBI crime lab. I don't care about my job, period. And Fred knew what the Bureau would do, and he was willing to face it. That's why I tell the Vietnam story.
With the help of the Justice Department, Aldred and Whitehurst started cases in court. And that's when they started to feel the repercussions of blowing the whistle.
We had times of driving on the freeway, of being followed. They were out with binoculars at our house. My daughter answered the phone, and they asked for your mom and dad, and she says, they're asleep. The guy told her, you tell them they're dead meat, and hung up the phone.
The emotional roller coaster that my wife and I went through, our extended families went through, my daughter went through. I remember having her in counseling when she was 4 years old because of the stress in our house. An FBI that would do the things that we saw and knew were being done would stop at nothing at all, to avoid accountability. We didn't know what was going to come next.
Despite the toll it took on their lives, they refused to back down. They eventually received modest settlements, but their careers were devastated, and they found very little protection from the government. Chris Kolesnik of the National Whistleblower Center specializes in whistleblowing legislation.
Capitol Hill has not passed sweeping legislation like they need to do, mainly because they're not on the front lines with whistleblowers. If you're disclosing information about wrongdoing, you think that you're doing your patriotic duty and that you have a right to get protected. And of course, that's just not the case. My advice to people who are going to blow the whistle is keep your head down, because if you don't, it's going to get shot off.
You just see time after time blacklisting, people losing their jobs, losing their homes, divorces. If a whistleblower collects a lot of money, you just have to sit back and say, what hell did they go through? What did they suffer? What did they lose?
Even though Hughes Aircraft and the FBI were forced to pay settlements after 10 years of unemployment and little change at Hughes, Ruth Aldred wonders if it was worth it.
It's like my justice lawyer said, nobody cares, Ruth. Nobody cares.
I signed a contract, if you will, with the American people to do a job. I took an oath on the stage in Quantico, Virginia on the 5th day of June, 1982, to be an FBI agent, to uphold the Constitution and to enforce the law.
My life went in front of me, my career, my job, my children, and he's sitting there telling me nobody cares. And all of a sudden I thought, why am I caring?
If someone came to me and asked me about whether they should blow the whistle or not, I would tell them to do it.
If you're forced to choose between blowing the whistle or keeping silent, base your decisions on ideals such as honesty and patriotism. A monetary reward may not be worth the price you'll pay.
Secrets.
Coming up next on Forbidden Secrets. Beauty queens, on the front lines fighting injustice, standing up to oppression, the secret power of beauty queens. Then,
Secrets.
it's called the Sport of Kings. Behind the color and pageantry of horse racing is an ugly secret. Jockeys are dying to make the weight.
Secrets.
And now, a little secret of life. Zebras. Are they white with black stripes or black with white stripes? The answer right after this.
Secrets. Forbidden secrets. Secrets. Forbidden secrets.
Are zebras white animals with black stripes or black animals with white stripes? Well, take your pick. They can be both. But interestingly, no two patterns are alike. In fact, zebras use the striped patterns to identify each other.
Secrets.
Think you know all there is to know about beauty pageants? Well, there's a secret world that exists behind that glittery curtain. A world inhabited by bright, brave women who are using their crowns to reap power for positive change. Think you know all about beauty pageants? Think they're all just roses and poses, gowns and crowns, waving and weeping and costumes? Well, think again.
They could not get used to the idea that I am black and I had just won Miss South Africa, and it was a wave of change for a lot of people.
There's glitz and glamour on the outside, but there's guts and glory on the inside. Step behind the curtain of secrecy and enter the hidden world of beauty pageants. You may be drawn into today's beauty pageants by their undeniable glamour, excitement, and the fun of trying to pick the winner. But behind the curtain are hidden stories of courageous women. At beauty pageants today, it's no longer just about looks and a bright smile. It's about determination and bravery. Attention is given to accomplishments.
Most girls have graduated from college or working on a PhD that win beauty pageants.
Today, contests reflect new attitudes.
It's not about the big hair, and it's not about dyeing everybody blonde. It's about making you the most beautiful person you are versus trying to create a completely different person.
No one argues that once the pageants were a symbol of women's oppression, measured by the standards of leering judges.
50, 60 years ago, pageants were a little bit more full of fluff, and it was more like a modeling contest.
Contestants found themselves treated like meat on the hook. All that counted was curves and inches. Now, accomplishments and ambition are what matter. Today's contestants wield political clout from a world stage.
They're very politically active, they know what they believe, and on top of that, they're socially responsible.
The contestants are rising above the roles of bystanders and victims within repressive societies. Take, for example, the courageous effort of Amila Nojig, Miss Besieged Sarajevo in 1993. She had to risk death to compete.
And a confrontation line was somewhere in between me and those buildings. So it was quite dangerous. They could have seen and killed anybody anytime. This is the main entrance of the building where I live, and by this granite, my sister was luckily not too badly wounded.
At the edge of the city, a very hot area, there was artillery fire, there was tank fire, there was fire from rocket-propelled grenade launchers, heavy machine gun fire, people running for their lives, absolute insanity. A friend of mine said, "Mike, there's a beauty contest this afternoon." How in the hell is there a beauty contest in the middle of a war zone?
It was quite primitive. All was quite primitive. Everybody had to bring their own clothes. At that moment, all world media was actually focused on Sarajevo. Because of that, I mean, the whole contest was really the top story, and I think there was a way for me to show actually to the rest of the world what is going on here, and to try on any way to help those people who are living here in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
A crowd of 2,000 dodged snipers and landmines to attend this oasis of normal life.
Miss Besieged Sarajevo. It was almost like dark humor, because they put in the besieged thing, and it was kind of, I think it was to the outside world, it was a little bit of a dig, because you saw the banner when they're walking across the stage that says, "Please don't kill us."
Today's contest, even the calmer ones, provide new opportunities for the women who compete in them.
There is no school or university that could teach me what I learned in the last 7 years.
These women reflect how the world around them has changed and become more complicated. Why do you compete? Isn't such a simple, pat answer anymore.
It's very easy to say that pageants are just these trivial events that mean nothing or that are empty of meaning. It's much harder, I think, to look at them seriously and see what they have to say to us about politics, about nationhood, about social class, about race, about multiculturalism.
Quietly, almost secretly, beauty queens have undergone a transformation. Today's beauty queens are all about changing minds, changing standards, changing the way we look at women around the world. In doing so, they're changing the way we look at ourselves.
Secrets.
Duty-free shopping. Sounds like a can't-miss opportunity to buy something special at a bargain price. But is it? Our travel expert Laura McKenzie reveals the secrets to getting what you bargained for duty-free.
One of the great joys of traveling is going shopping and coming home with a bargain, right? Combing the flea markets, wheeling and dealing in the bazaars. Bargain hunting, it's big vacation business. So where else can you go for a great deal? How about those two famous words, duty-free? The duty-free store, the best place to buy, right? Wrong. Well, technically what duty-free means is free of the tax or duty that the government puts on certain goods or items. What I think duty-free means is rip-off. The prices aren't that great, and with the exception of things you're going to consume while traveling, like cigarettes and alcohol, you can probably do just as good or better on the street. And I think what most people forget is that it may be duty-free in the country you're traveling, but you're going to have to pay duty on that item going back into the United States if it's not within your allowance. In most cases, your personal exemption is $400, but there are exceptions based on the countries you visited. and your allowance could triple to $1,200. If you're on vacation and you want to find bargains, the first thing you need to do is find out where the locals shop, not where the tourists go. You want to go where the people who live there shop, and that's where you're going to get the best deals. You can also find duty-free stores in town of different cities. You have to show a passport that you're not a resident and that you are leaving the country within a certain amount of time. You can find them on the borders, say between Canada and the US, and you can also find them now in flight and online. What everyone doesn't want you to know is that duty-free stores are not a bargain. If you do your homework and shop around, then and only then will you get the best price. Remember that when you return to the United States, you're required to declare everything that you did not have when you left. So you have to keep your sales receipts, pack your gifts and your purchases separately, and definitely pay attention to the signs in the customs area. All this will definitely make your entrance back into the country a lot more convenient.
Coming up next on Forbidden Secrets. Are aliens kidnapping humans? If so, it's a full-time job. Is it really happening? If not, what is? Plus, it's called making the weight. For jockeys, it means the difference between winning or losing it all. Discover the ugly secret of the sport of kings.
And now, a little secret of life. Do corks come from cork trees? The answer right after this.
Forbidden secrets. Forbidden secrets.
You bet, there are cork trees, and Portugal is the world's largest producer. In fact, they have regulations protecting cork trees dating back to 1320. And during the 1920s and 30s, it became illegal to cut down cork trees other than for essential thinning and getting rid of old non-producing trees.
Secrets.
Known as pound for pound, some of the world's toughest athletes, jockeys, work in one of the most exciting and dangerous sports. One of the sport's forbidden secrets is that the riders are taking even bigger chances before they ever get on their horses.
I can barely make the weight. I was taking diet pills, I was taking diuretics.
You know, I'd wake up weighing 123 and have to get to 116. I'd eat before the races, you know, throw out my food.
That's one reason they get into drugs.
Has been sent along to the early league.
I did, too. It's easy.
You would think that a jockey would be the last person to have a weight problem. Obviously, the profession is only for the small and tough. Over the years, all professional athletes have gotten bigger, taller, heavier, except for jockeys. The average jockey is under 5 feet tall and weighs less than 115 pounds.
When I rode my first race, I think I was 83 pounds.
Corey Black was a winning jockey. In 1986, he led the nation's apprentice riders in purse money won. But as the years raced by, Black found it harder to maintain his weight. Just like all of us, every year it got worse.
I'd wake up weighing 123 and have to get to 116. It seemed like every year it just got a little bit tougher, a little bit tougher.
Dropping pounds to make the weight limit for a specific race is called making the weight. If you can't make the weight, you don't ride. You don't win. And before you know it, you're cleaning stables for a living. A lucrative livelihood of fame, glamour, and excitement, all lost by a pound or two. Seems absurd, but also tragic. Take the case of Chris Antley. A two-time Kentucky Derby winner, Antley was one of the top jockeys in the sport. Antley set a world record by winning the most races in one day, a total of 9 wins. But on December 2nd, 2000, Chris Antley was found dead in his home near Santa Anita Racetrack. Murder was first suspected, but an autopsy revealed evidence of drug abuse. One drug found in his system is banned in the U.S. Its use? Weight control. At the track, the secret was out. Antley died making the weight. And if things don't change, he may not be the last. For hidden behind the colorful pageantry is the ugly secret of eating disorders and drug use among jockeys. Lasix is a medicine prescribed for horses. Some jockeys use the powerful drug for weight loss.
I could take the Lasix like they were candy. Most guys would take a half to maybe one, and it would wipe them out. And I got so immune to them, I was taking 8 a day. I'd take 4 at like 6:30 in the morning. I'd kind of be a good guinea pig for the FDA or whatever.
Another widespread technique is called flipping. That's jockey talk for bulimia.
I'd eat at 9:30 or 10, throw my food, throw it back up. Your stomach wouldn't know the food was gone for a while. And so I'd feel satisfied. And, I don't know where I got my strength from. I probably rode at, 50 to 75% of what I could have rode at, for most of my career.
I do know how to lose 11 pounds in 1 or 2 days.
Joy Scott is a veteran who's raced for over 25 years. Scott knows how easy it is to fall victim to the shortcuts of weight loss.
You first of all take a laxative, with a lot of fiber, and then you would go and sweat and jog. You would have to watch your water intake, but take enough potassium, because you gain weight and then you need to lose it. You gain it and lose it. That's a hard thing for your body, because your body wants to hang on to everything.
Being one of the few women jockeys made it even tougher for Scott to maintain her weight.
I didn't have a girls' jocks room. I couldn't get in the sauna. So I had to go sweat in plastic bags and plastic sweats and get in my little VW bus, and roll down the windows and do sit-ups and exercises.
Scott is determined to control her weight through good nutrition and never use diet drugs.
The main thing is I can give myself enough nutrition without starving myself, or some riders can't. That's one reason they get into drugs. I did too. It's easy. It's easy. There's a lot of them around. It's very easy weight management. It's very bad life management.
Jockeys are not the only athletes who stress their bodies to the limit. Dr. Randy Martin is a former Olympic contending gymnast. A practitioner of Oriental and holistic medicine, the doctor fears the new trend in sports.
Nobody really cares about the athlete and their physical long-term health when it comes to athletic performance. My friends who were gymnast Olympians all deteriorated within 5 years after their final performances as either drug addicts or having eating disorders.
One of the sport's superstars is Lafitte Pinkai. The jockey is a veteran of numerous battles to make the weight.
There was a point in my career where I was having a tremendous problem with my weight. I can barely make the weight. I was jogging around the track. I was taking diet pills. I was taking diuretics. And there are some times that I eat and I flip my dinners and things like that. And I was just such a bad shape.
At age 53, Pinkai has discovered the secret to weight control is exercise and nutrition, not diet aids or drugs.
When an athlete employs these types of techniques, the whole body begins to basically fall apart. It's basically a form of malnutrition. But it's malnutrition that won't show up for a number of years after the performance has taken place. And that's why the jockeys and the various athletes aren't really aware of what they're doing to themselves.
Some say raising the weight limits would pose less of a health risk to jockeys. The horses wouldn't care if the jockeys weighed more, nor would the fans. But horse racing is ruled by stubborn tradition. Most believe the challenge of making the weight will always be a part of the sport of kings.
What a
came out well. Sheen has been sent along to the early lead. Personal pride from the inside.
Secrets.
Coming up next on Forbidden Secrets. You've heard the reports. You know the claims.
When Eddie was taken up on the ship, I was by his side the whole time.
Now, know the secret of alien abductions.
Secrets.
And now, a little secret of life. Why do golf balls have dimples? The answer right after this.
Secrets. Forbidden secrets. Secrets. Forbidden secrets.
Why do golf balls have dimples? Well, a ball traveling through the air creates turbulence behind it. This causes drag and slows the ball down. The dimples on a golf ball create a smaller area for the turbulence, so there's less drag. In fact, a ball with dimples on it can travel 4 times as far as a smooth ball.
Secrets.
Alien abductions. Can it be happening? Or is the abduction phenomena just a new version of an old story? They're small, they're bald, with big gloomy eyes. Alien abductors. Are they real? Or are they only phantoms with no more substance than a dream? Not a day goes by before someone, somewhere, reports an alien abduction. The story has become as predictable as a TV sitcom.
In the typical alien experience, there are some elements that seem to recur through most of them. And that will be that the person will be usually in bed asleep, and they will, in a dream state, or maybe they're half awake, they'll begin to feel paralyzed, like they can't move. They will often notice a bright light in their room. They will then notice creatures, the aliens themselves, right there in their bedroom. And because they're paralyzed, they can't get away. They can't call out for help. And then what will happen next is often the person will feel themselves rising up out of their bed or out of their body, and then they are whisked through the walls. And they are abducted up into usually a spacecraft that is somehow hovering above their home.
Whitley Strieber is often cited as the person most responsible for the belief in alien abductions.
Carl Sagan wrote an essay saying that we'd probably be visited by aliens on the average of every 10,000 years. Why wouldn't it be true? The universe is such a huge place.
Like many abductees, Strieber recalled his experience only after hypnosis.
If your experience of an alien abduction is recalled under hypnosis, under the guidance of someone who believes in it, then this memory can either be implanted or can be called up out of the collective unconscious, if you will, and dressed up and infused with an intensity that will make it seem like your personal experience.
An expert in mythology, Pamela J. Smith, has studied the abduction phenomena in detail.
None of the abductees are, to my knowledge, witnessed. You know, it's not like the wife sees her husband being lifted up out of the bed and propelled through the walls. And it's not like a neighbor out, gazing at the stars, sees the neighbor shooting up into the spaceship. So there are no other witnesses to what happens. There apparently is no physical evidence of the craft, of the creatures, of the experiments that were done. And for all intents and purposes, what it can sound like to someone just listening to the account is, it's just a very vivid dream.
Most abductions are solo ventures, but occasionally a mass alien abduction is reported. A group of senior citizens recently claimed that aliens took all of them at once. People believed they'd been abducted as children. Decades later, the aliens returned. The group rendezvoused with the spaceship at a secret location. Abductees often endow aliens with supernatural qualities. This could be a clue to the ultimate source for the abduction phenomena.
The alien abduction phenomenon is simply a modern interpretation of a very old tendency that humans have to connect us with the gods, to connect us with something outside of ourselves, to make us more than human.
In fact, many believe they are the product of alien encounters of the most intimate kind.
People I've come to know are from a star system called the Pleiades. I am one of their children, and I am one of many children. I want people to know that I am not the only one, because I have 7 sisters who are identical to me.
I am a sister of the 7 sisters of Eddie Page, the hybrid alien. I don't like the word alien. I like to call us celestial beings.
I've got to know my father, who is a Palladian from a planet in the star system called Treasuous.
Almost every mythology, from every place on the planet, in every time of history, you will have instances of humans interbreeding with the gods, or the angels, or the race of giants that came before the humans, or the special ones from the stars. So this is nothing new.
When Eddie was taken up on the ship, I was by his side the whole time and administering my light to him, to his forehead, while they were replacing his body with the 8 alien organs.
Perhaps the secret of the alien abductions is that it's the new mythology. It's the way we are now explaining what happens to us and the world around us in the same way that the ancients would use gods and goddesses coming down out of the heavens, off of Mount Olympus, in the fiery chariots to interact with human beings. We're doing the same thing, only we're using space people, aliens from other dimensions, aliens from other worlds, who come down and interact with us. And this new mythology then is serving, as a mythology always should, to explain the world within us and the world around us. In that sense, that's its best secret.
Secrets.
Thanks for joining us on Forbidden Secrets.
On the next episode of Forbidden Secrets: death curses, vengeful spirits, and bad bones that hurt. Sounds silly, but it's not.
A curse like bone pointing, or anything for that matter, relies on belief to make it work. It's a psychological warfare. Yes, I did ask God for help.
Discover the secret. Learn the truth. Secret superstitions of the Aborigine. Then. Tastes like home cooking. Ha! 80% of the flavors in the food you eat are created at giant chemical plants.
We can make a natural peach flavoring, but not derived from peach.
They make anything taste any way they want.
I like to think of the flavorist's job as recreating nature.
Plus, it began as a secret known only to a few. Plutonium, uranium, materials for weapons of mass destruction sold to the highest bidder on a nuclear black market. Discover the terrifying secret. Learn the horrifying truth.
Secrets.